Let's read some Glitch in the Matrix stories. Dear Tessica, hi. I follow your shorts and from time to time I listen to your videos on YouTube. I am going to try to explain this as best I can as this happened when I was 5 years old. My family and I were living in Tennessee way back in the early 60s. I was 4 or 5 years old at that time and our home was well outside the city limits, approximately 10 to 12 miles from any stores or shops. So going into town was somewhat of a big deal for us kids and it would be sort of a family outing. So we would go into town and do bulk shopping about every 2 weeks or so. Mom and us 5 kids. 5 kids is a lot of children to take shopping. I am very impressed by your mother. And this summer's morning, we went about doing the shopping at various stores for the supplies. We younger children were skipping and hopping, singing and laughing on some sidewalk caked in hopscotch patterns, whilst my mom, older sister, and brother would be in the stores. This could all take easily 2 or more hours as the grocery shopping was not the only event of the morning. Many other things and issues would also be taken care of, so we continued to play hopscotch. We had most of the major groceries already in the car, yet mom needed to pick up shoes that were repaired, as well as some items from the cleaners, so pretty much a normal trip for our bunch. Nothing special. As our mom was going in and out of the shops and stores, we 3, my twin younger brother and I, continued playing on the sidewalk. Mom reminding us to be mindful of other families doing the same as us and to be polite and aware. We behaved, trust me on that, and we would even ask our elders if they needed help and move aside to allow others to pass. Some other mothers allowed their children also to play with us. All was lovely and fun, and we were using a small stone to play hopscotch that skipped off the sidewalk and I chased after it. I did retrieve that small stone, and as I stood back up, my face was brushed by the fabric of a lady's skirt. I, being a bit stunned, stepped back and looked up at a beautifully dressed, mature, older woman. I literally was captured by her rather handsome face, a face that is clearly feminine yet strong with jade green eyes like my own. She knelt down and placed her hand on my face and said gently, "Mind the future, young one, and be like an arrow, straight and true." I was still a little shocked, but returned her kindness and politely said the same back to her. She smiled and turned and left. My older sister appeared suddenly and asked me, "Who is that?" I answered back that she was the older version of myself, come to visit. When all was finished, we piled into our station wagon and my older sister told my mom about the mysterious lady and the fact that the woman looked like an older version of me. My mom stopped, turned around to face me, and asked in a nervous way that sort of frightened me, "What did she say to you? Repeat it to the letter as you recall." I told her, and my mom turned pale and silent and did not speak for the remainder of the trip back home. What does mom know that we don't know yet? When we arrived, we were greeted by my grandparents and other family members, and the unloading of kids and stuff was finished in minutes, so we 3 rascals went to play more. Lunch was called and we washed up outside and went to eat with children, parents, and grandparents and others. The table was full, at least 14 to 16 people. Farming family. Conversations always go around the table, and at one point, mom was talking to my grandma and they got very serious and went into the kitchen, and a moment later, my grandma called me to come help with something. So I skipped into the kitchen and my grandma was leaning down towards me and asked the same as my mom had asked, "What word for word did this lady say to you?" So once again, I answered, "Mind the future, little one." Grand and mom looked to each other, and this really caught my attention as they both seemed to pale a little. Then my mom added, "She," meaning me, said that the lady was the older version of herself. My grand again leaned towards me and asked, "How do you think that that lady was you, but older?" I merely stated honestly that I know my eyes. She had my eyes. Same color and shape, older to be sure, but my eyes. Grand handed me something in a bowl to take back to the table whilst they stayed in the kitchen for a few more minutes. The meal was finished, and so we all settled down for an afternoon rest. Late in the day, there would be chores to do, and dinner would be around 7 or 8 p.m. Time for a light meal and bathing and bedtime for us little kids. Yet Mom and Grand were in the kitchen when I came in to say goodnight, and still both were in a mood. Grand had a box of old pictures and called me over, sat me up on the counter, and asked me of one picture. "Is this the woman that you saw?" I was so happy to see her again, and those eyes were just as stunning as I had seen them that very morning, and the smile that was so gentle. I said, "That's me, that's her, it's us, even the same clothes." My Grant asked me the colors of the outfit, and I said clearly caramel brown and chocolate vest with a cream colored blouse. Grant and my mom were so shocked as the photo was black and white. Grant put me down off the counter and brushed my hair and kissed my head. Mom said clearly, "Off to bed now." So many years ago, and I still recall that day as clearly as I recall today, and I only just found out just before my mother's death that they knew who I had seen, and that it was not at all possible for me to have seen and spoken to a woman that had been dead 35 to 40 years before my death, and that that lady was not in her 80s. The lady I saw was in her 40s. I could not have seen this, as the person was my great-grandmother and a copy of myself. When I was born, my grand held me and said to my mom, "This child has the eyes of her own mother and the eyes of age, eyes that looked out at you and really saw you. The eyes of an old spirit not finished with this realm. realm. So that is the story, and to be sure, there is a tiny bit more to it. It's a tiny town in Austria and a house and a location on a small lane not far from the tiny town's main square, and I know that home. I have never been there in all my life until one driving holiday my husband and I took a few years ago. As we were passing through the village past the small square, I was hit with a vision of the house and its location. I asked my husband to please turn back to that village and park in front of the square, please. He did as I asked, and he could feel what he calls my witchiness, LOL. We parked, and I turned toward him and I said, as God be my witness, I know this place, and I am about to tell you of a house just behind the square on the left, and I shall tell you it is 2 stories and white, and that there is a small front garden and a much larger one in the back, and that in the gables there is a Cornic work of the type from Hungary with spindles hanging down, shutters with heart shapes in the center, and that I used to live in that house. My husband pulled out his pipe and the carafe with coffee and said, in a moment, we shall see. I told him of the lady that day when I was 4 or 5 and all that took place, and that I never ever heard stories of my great-grandma or any of her family, yet I know this place, this village, and I know the house is there. We finished our coffee and set out across the square, and there in the left-hand corner was an alley. We passed that, and it opens up to a narrow roadway. Turning again to the left, I began to skip, just like when I was a child, and I said to him in a merely 100 feet, there it is, do you see it? He was floored. The house was overgrown with vines, and the garden was a jungle, yet through it all you could see the very house I described to him at the square. He turned towards and asked, had I seen any pictures of homes from my families that left Europe to come to America? I clearly said no, there were no pictures of places, just a few pictures of my great-grandmother. No letters, no postcards, only 2 pictures of her, and those were in a studio, not outdoors. I described a farm on the hillside not far from this place, and that it was mostly stone and timbers, that it was more for the cows than for people, and it may still be there, just above the village. He had to know and asked me to give him some indications, and I said sure. We go back to the car and head towards the end of town, where we would find a dirt road on our left and take that for about 2 to 3 miles, and the structure would be on the road on the right, nestled into the hillside. So we set off, and there was a dirt road, and we took it. Yet not far up that road there was a massive iron cattle gate and grate with a sign warning that this is a private property, do not enter. We sat there wondering if we should walk up the road, and he pointed out that the grate was for large animals and that he would hate to run into a bull or guard dogs and such. So we backed down the portion of the driveway, and he knew and I knew that the stone barn and corral was still there. We have been married for 27 years, and he still calls me his bewitched. Wow, what a cool story. This went even further than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was just going to be an either like timelines crossing over situation or like you saw an ancestor, but then for you to be driving randomly on a holiday and know where you were and be like, I lived here, this is where I lived, and describe it. That is so cool. I loved this one. Thank you so much for sharing. Let me know what you guys think in the comments and tell me what you think the chill factor of this story was. Did it give you a little bit of chills? Number 1, 2, medium chills, 3, mega chill. I'm Auntie Matrix, and if you like stories like this, please make sure that you're following me, and you can send me yours to this email address right here.